The Volkswagen Golf GTI has always set the benchmark in the hot hatch segment. In fact, the Mark I version was the car that started the whole hot hatch movement in the first place. And over the years, the Golf has had a lot of challenges. The most recent one comes from Renault, which has just launched the brand new Mégane GT, a car that seems to be positioned directly against the Golf. The question is, does it have what it takes? Frankly, it's a big ask for the French hatchback. While the more powerful hardcore Mégane RS enjoys cult status in the super hatch segment, its all-new GT sibling is a lot tamer. And with the GTI already in its 7th generation, the Mégane can't muster the same hot hatch heritage either. But on paper, it's pitched head-on against the Golf. This is probably the most handsome Golf since the chunky Golf 4. It does doff a hat to all the previous generation Golfs, but it's clean and chiseled and very contemporary. By comparison, the Renault is more organic, more rounded with lots of curves and contours. It's also not quite as sexy as the muscular three-door, despite the fact that both cars cost the same price. As we'll see, pricing is a key issue in this contest, and the Mégane is a strong contender in outright value terms. But the different design approaches also indicate just how different the two hot hatchbacks are. Yes, they're both 5-door designs, suggesting similar levels of convenience, and yes, they both target motoring enthusiasts who need to combine dynamic appeal and capability with more pragmatic considerations such as safety, comfort and practicality. It's a juggling act that the Golf GTI has managed to master very convincingly indeed, but let's take a look under the bonnet of the two contenders. As far as drivetrains are concerned, these two cars are very closely matched. They both run 2-litre turbocharged engines, they both are front-wheel driven, and they both have 6-speed gearboxes. The Golf's power output, 162 kilowatts linked to 350 newton meters of torque. That gives you a power-to-weight ratio of 117 kilowatt per ton, and the gearbox in this particular instance, a 6-speed DSG dual-clutch unit. The Renault, on the other hand, exactly the same power output, also 162 kilowatt, slightly less torque at 340 newton meters, and because the Mégane is slightly heavier as well, the power-to-weight ratio 0.5 less at 116.5 kilowatt per ton. And this particular example has a 6-speed manual gearbox, which, by the way, is the only option. The Mégane isn't only slightly heavier at 1,391 kilograms, but it's also marginally longer, wider and taller than the Golf. The wheelbase is longer too, and the tracks are wider. However, the differences are no more than a few millimeters in each instance, and for all intents and purposes, these two hatchbacks are very similar in size and proportion. But the interior design approach is quite different. Compared to the Mégane, the Golf's cabin looks and feels more sophisticated and more upmarket. The switchgear, though, not quite as intuitive, with one exception, the colour touchscreen display, which here is within easier reach. The seats very much in the same league, both heavily bolstered, both very supportive, and overall comfort levels very good as well. The Golf interior oozes understated elegance, although some might consider it too visually austere. The colour scheme is monochromatic, and even the touchscreen display uses its hues sparingly. Tactile quality is impressive across the board. The interior of the Mégane is clean, functional and ergonomically intuitive. It's also a little bit on the understated side because you don't quite realize at first glance just how much standard kit there really is. These seats almost too heavily bolstered and quite bulky, but very comfortable to sit in, although I have to say that driving position-wise, the Golf for me works better. But in terms of value, the Mégane beats the Golf hands down. The Renault's two-tone upholstery borders on the garish, however, and the cream sections become grubby very quickly. Impressively, sat-nav is standard, but the touchscreen is hard to reach, and it's best to use the center console-mounted controller to navigate between the various menus. But perhaps most importantly, what is it like to drive? While the Mégane feels subjectively as punchy and as quick as the Golf, and considering that they have very similar weights and identical outputs, it's interesting that this Mégane is quite a bit slower than the GTI. The 0-100 time, 7.6 seconds, top speed in the 240 km/h region, which by all accounts, is quick enough for most people, but it isn't quite as quick as the Golf. More importantly, though, is the poise of the car. The Golf just turns in that much more crisper, whereas this car is quite a bit of hard work and gets quite busy in the twisties. Understeer is much more prevalent, robbing the Mégane of turn-in precision, and there's less front-end grip. The stability control is also too intrusive, despite a chassis that has more potential than the car's electronics allow. In straight-line terms, however, the GT is definitely closer to the Golf than the factory figures suggest. On the move, the GTI is a class act in every respect. It might not quite feel that way, but the Golf GTI is significantly quicker in a straight line than the Mégane GT. The 0 to 100 time, 6.5 seconds. That's 1.1 seconds quicker. The top speed, 244 kilometers an hour, which is a lot closer. But I suppose it's really the handling of the car that is where the differences lie. The GTI just feels the more composed vehicle, nicer turn-in, a lot of grip on the front. It's just a much more poised and much more entertaining car to drive. The GTI oozes confidence and composure, making it easy to get the most out of the car. The electronic diff lock aids traction, and the overall stance is more neutral, with no intervention from the stability control unless you come into the tight stuff too hot. As much as the Golf and the Renault are closely matched, there are two elements that stand out. The first is performance, the other one is value. In dynamic terms, the Golf is the superior car. It is quicker, it has a better turn-in, it's more dynamic, and it's more agile as well. The overall feel is composed and confidence-inspiring. I have to say the Mégane is certainly punchy and powerful, but as the clock shows, it's not quite as quick as the Golf. But if we turn to value, the picture changes completely. The difference in price between these cars before extras is 65,000 Rand, which to my mind says that if your emphasis is on bang for the buck, the Renault has to take the prize. One could argue that the GTI costs more because it is the better all-round performer and it is more rewarding to drive, but the Renault gets close for a lot less money, and if budget is a consideration, the Renault Mégane GT won't disappoint. A punchy engine means the Mégane GT always feels stronger than expected, while loads of standard kit and a comfortable cabin add further appeal and value. It's a lot of car for the money. However, the steering lacks precision and traction is compromised when driving with intent, while the intrusive stability control can't be switched off at speeds above 60 kilometers an hour. This 7th generation Golf GTI has all the polish, poise and refinement expected of a benchmark car, with ample urge matched to a superb chassis. Road manners still lead the class, with precision and feedback the key factors. The cabin looks and feels classy, but the Mégane offers more for less, making the Golf look pricey.